Cool. So yeah, welcome everyone. It's my job to just quickly introduce the project in general, which I will do very, very quickly. And then we will get to today's event. So this is part of the Post-Qualitative Research Collective. If you'd like to know more about the project, you can go to our website. It started initially as a project that was part of the funded by the National Research Foundation of South Africa, but it's kind of grown past that. It's no longer has that funding, and it's blossomed into this incredible international community of people doing post-qual work around the world. And we have many members who participate in different ways from all continents. So if you want to check out, we have lots of like pedagogical resources. We just launched an online course. Then we also have a really great book series. So yeah, this is the orientation of our event today. And please do look at our website if you'd like to know anything more. And I think my job is done, so I'll just be timekeeping from now, and I'll hand it over to Mirka, who is our difficultator facilitator for today. Thank you.
Good morning, good evening, welcome. Mirka Korre from Arizona State University. I will just very briefly share what we're going to do today, and then I turn it to the panelists who will introduce themselves. So first we do, after the introduction, Karen will present the vignettes as a kind of provocations for today's conversation. Then we're going to get really brief example responses from all the panelists. And then we're going to have a discussion amongst the panelists about the topic. Then we're going to break into the small groups, breakout groups, where all the panelists will lead one or be there to facilitate one. And then we talk more in detail. After that, we return to the whiteboard and kind of collectively discuss this and have a shared conversation and think about the next steps. So welcome all, good to have you here. And then why don't we start with Karen? Why don't you introduce yourself and we go through the panel?
Okay, thank you very much. And all of you also for agreeing, and yeah, and lovely to have so many people in the room. And my name is Karen Mures. I work in Oulu in the north of Finland, but also still connected with the University of Cape Town in South Africa. And my research is very much in early childhood and in post-humanist, agential realist research. And so I'm just going to hand over maybe to Zern.
Hello, I thought that's going to happen when I pick up my cup. Anyway, my name is Søren Finn Menning. I am actually now basically been based in Norway, southern Norway. I also work with education, early childhood education, but I have a background as a filmmaker before that. So I written scripts for short and feature films and work with commercials and music videos and that kind of thing. But now I'm sort of working as a teacher and researcher and at the university. Thank you. I don't know. Should I send it?
Yeah, you send. You point to the next person in the panel.
Okay. Chris, maybe you wanna now I wake you up. No, you wanna say some few words.
Hi everyone, it's a great privilege to be here, to be invited. Thank you, Karen and George, for inviting me to this session. I'm speaking to you, I'm working from home today from Birmingham in central England, and my role is as I head up a small but far-reaching research group of early childhood researchers. We specialise in qualitative research, but also research that is what I call in the real world. So in the real world of practice, a lot of our work has been around, and I'm also president of a European wide group, and we've developed we did a big piece of work last year developing ethical guidelines for those of us who work in our sector. And it's quite interesting because even under the previous guidelines, we had a lot of work to do to get research and development ethically placed, particularly around the rights of the human beings, because we work with people, and particularly the voice of young children and ensuring their rights. And I mean the youngest children, like babies, toddlers, those who are often pre-verbal, or those with communication difficulties. But I'm conscious, and when we did the New Gods, that we're in a new world, which has to have a duty of ethical care towards the non-human, the wider world, the more than human world, we might call it, but also the whole ethical things around the virtual world that we're all living with with AI technology, and how that impacts on not only the world of the people we're interested in, of young children and families that we're interested in, but also how it relates to the way we do our work as researchers and practitioners and people out in the sector. So it's a fast developing but fascinating field. But ethics for me is at the heart of it, and trying our very best to kind of keep up with the ethical challenges that the world keeps throwing at us is very difficult, but really deeply important. I'm thrilled to be here to listen to what's going to happen today. So that was probably too much, but I'm known for being quite verbose. I'm sorry.
Thanks very much. I don't think Viv can make it tonight. It was a bit of a family crisis. So what we just gonna basically start maybe with a vignette. What do you think? Yeah, Erica, is that okay? And I love what you were saying about the everyday life and on the ground, Chris, and you know how much I appreciate the work you do. And I think, you know, with the collective as well, I mean, its reasons for its existence is really working with everyday life, challenges, opportunities, and really just what does all of this mean for people who are doing research. And so this is just one example of the work we do. And I think it's important. So I hope you can all read this, because the idea of putting it on here was that as we talking and thinking together, it might be at some point that you will want to go back to this. So first of all, maybe George, if you can share the video of the first one.
Let me just make sure I'm sharing my sound.
Okay. So this is a video clip that is part of an article that has been published. And it is from an article that Synnøve and I have co-authored, and Synnøve is also here in the room, so welcome. I'm really delighted that you are here as well. So here's the vignette for us to think with. As part of my field work, I went on a field trip with a group of children with their teachers to a beach. The opportunity arose to take a video of two children singing a song. Luckily, I was able to check whether they had consented right there and then, because I'd brought the consent forms with me. Out of the 40 pupils, I could not really remember which parents had consented to the audio or videotapes. These two children's parents had consented, but of course I also wanted to check if the children were still okay with me filming them. So I asked them again, and one of them said, "I do not wish to show my face," but in a flash, the children solved the problem themselves by turning their hoodies backwards and covering their faces with them. Several years later, the video became interesting for an article where we wanted to analyze this video clip in a post-humanist way. Since the children had covered their faces and their parents had consented to making videos of them, we thought everything was fine. However, in the consent form, I had written, this is Synnøve, that if I would use the video, it would be anonymous. Had the children anonymized themselves well enough? Since the children were singing a song, we could not hear their normal speaking voice, which is regarded as personal information by the GDPR. And since the video was made 5 years ago, the children's voices will be quite different now when they're no longer 8 or 9 years old, but 13 to 14 years old. So what should we do? Well, we could, of course, ask for new consent. Still, with the children being under the age of 15, their parents would be the legally consenting party. So asking for consent from their parents would breach the anonymity, exposing the children to their parents. And what would 13 to 14-year-olds want to consent to such a video being published? It might feel more embarrassing now when they are teenagers. At the time of making the video, it was quite the opposite. The children wanted me to publish it even on YouTube, which I assured them I would not. What bothered us as researchers are the following concerns. What does the current trope about participation and inclusion really mean when children's voices can't be included, even when they themselves consent or assent? Moreover, the technologies themselves, for example, iPhone recording, filter out the sounds of the modern human. It tries to block out background noise, or inverted commas. Also, the voices of adult humans tend to be privileged over those of children. So that's kind of the first vignette we can respond to and we can use as a provocation. The second one is about research with your own children, in inverted commas. And yeah, this is Liam, and this is an assemblage or Liam as phenomenon, and how Liam keeps popping up in my research in all sorts of different ways. I was having a coffee with a colleague I know well at university, and we were chatting about what we were doing at the moment. So I told her about my current research. I include my children in a lot of my writing and presentations, even with their own names. She asked me whether I was worried about including them in my research project, like Liam in the PowerPoint slide here below, or our youngest son. Isn't that unethical, she asked. So this is a quote. Since you're both their mother and the researcher and married to their father, who could consent on your child's behalf when he was too young to consent himself? Is it even possible for a child of the researcher to give a free consent to participate? What about when they get older, perhaps Googling themselves and finding their name in your research? This might become a real conflict between you later on, even if the child seemed willing at the time. I would be very careful about bringing your own children into research like this. So the question there is, what should I do? Abandon the whole idea? I take my children's word for it when they give consent as co-researchers. I treat them as able and resilient and think with them as part of my teaching and research. But maybe I am naive. So here are these two. So what we're starting off with, isn't it, George, is, or actually Mirka, you're a wonderful chair and you've been so kind to. So I'll hand over to you as provocation.
Okay.
We have two and people can respond to either one or both or.
Yes, thank you, Karen. So let's now go through the panelist responses to the provocation. About 5 minutes each. So who would like to start?
Just a question,
sure.
sorry. Should I keep sharing it or we leave it so we can see everyone's faces?
I would say let's leave our faces. We have it in the chat, so people can have
Great.
it open and change the screens if they want to return to the meeting.
Okay, great.
So who would like to start? Christine, Sharon, Karen?
I'll be last. I've already spoken so much.
I can start with something, and
Okay.
I'm only going to go into one side of it because I guess there are other elements, and so I'm gonna talk more about the one with the faces and the seeing and the anonymization and stuff like that, and basically what I think, I mean that's what also pops up in my own work, and I'm not talking about the sort of the legal issue, is voice recognizable or not, or is there whatever, but I'm talking about, I mean, The thing is, I'm always surprised because when I look at, what sort of documentary filmmakers or ethnographic filmmakers have done, they kind of had that problem all along the way. So in that area, there's always been a discussion of, what am I showing? What am I representing? And I had to be careful evaluating, is this okay? Is it not okay? And had always that ongoing process. And I think some of this is transferable to that situation, so that there is no answer to say, okay, is it okay to have the voices or not, or how long, or in 10 years later or not, or but that it is always needs an active questioning of what are you filming and what are you doing, which is different from each situation and has to be sort of responsible in each situation. So that would be sort of the documentary filmmaking point of view into a situation like that. I think that's enough for now.
Okay, shall I add in something here? And both of those vignettes, the questions that were posed at the end with both of them was going back in the future and maybe reworking something that was okay at the time, but there's questions, and I always think we should act very carefully and cautiously in that, and when we ask for permissions, we need to be aware that they are specific, and you're getting permission for that piece of work. If you want to go back, you need to kind of think that through in a long-term basis. Keep the contact details, and I would always envisage going back and checking if the subjects that are in the data remain content at that next stage in their life to give you permission to use it in that kind of way. I don't think you can assume that you've got their permissions for life. I think that's really quite dangerous in today's world and opens up all kinds of things. So I think being really careful when you get your consent, what it's for how long it lasts, and then saying to people, would you be willing for me to keep your details so that if there is then that's a possibility for you. And if you haven't done that, I think you have to kind of accept that you can't use the video because you don't know what the implications are for that particular subject. So that's one thing around the long-term use. The second one, which is about the use of your own child in research, and I think Karen, you and I have talked about this, that we shouldn't, no human being should be excluded from having a voice by the very act of who they happen to be born to. And I think there's a long tradition in our sector of children, of researchers being used in research. There's huge, and we have to be much more careful if you're doing that. But I think if you say that if it's your child, you shouldn't use it, you're effectively silencing the right of that child to have a voice. You're taking away their rights, which is, for me, even more unethical of including them with good permissions and good checks there. Because, in a way, and that little vignette says that, the parent of the child says that the child has influenced the research anyway, because the parent, of course, is influenced by the child. So why should they have the voice with the wisdom of the child, but not let the child have the voice or have the perspective there? So for that one, I strongly believe that with the right kind of ethical protocols and clearances, and we're getting much better at seeking consent or ongoing assent for quite young children now. I would always think if the child's got something valid and relevant to say, why would we not include them in the research? They can be very powerful, give powerful testimony to their daily lives, and have maybe if it's the child of the ethical, a more informed perspective even. So that's my 2 pennyworth for now.
Okay, so my 5 minutes, actually, already want to respond but I just combined that because what you were saying just now, Chris, just made me so think about voice, and we can do research with very young children, and that idea about voice is not just words, right? But in particular,
right.
and I like your point about it's always ongoing, it's not something that sometimes it is like that at universities, but I think that's the wrong way of doing it, where, okay, well, you sign a form and you tick a box and then that's done, but it is how it is ongoing, and I think it's a sign of really good research when actually start to notice that some of the children decide against, for example, being videoed, but now I go into details. For me, that is, and what I love about the post-qualitative angle of this is always asking the question of what is assumed, in terms of binaries between adult and child in this case, and also human and more than human, but especially adult and child, that we can ask even certain questions that, the question is, which was in the example, can't remember exactly what it was, but the idea that we can even be worried that children might change their minds when they are 15 or 18, and they're okay when they're 8. And so there are two assumptions there, I think. The first one is, why do we ask those questions about children and not about adults? So if Mirka gives consent about research, something that we be doing, then I would say, oh, but maybe Mirka changes her mind in 5 years' time, right? So why is it actually a quite normal question to ask with us? Why is that? So, and that for me has to do, and then I'll say no more, is about the figurations of child and childhood that we constantly live with and by, and we need to fight against, which is that children are fragile, that they are immature, that they are vulnerable, and that they are innocent, and that they need to be protected, and that they're not resilient enough to really be listened to. And when we think about the UN Convention of the Right of the Child, which is, and their participation rights, I think it's Article 12 or 13, where we need to consult them in the decisions in their lives. But do we really? So it is getting to these very the questions that are almost at the bottom, these deep questions that we need to ask ourselves about what is it that we think we can ask in the context of children that we would never even dare to ask in the context of adults. Lining up is one of them, but anyway, that is another thing. But I don't know. That's my penny's worth for now.
Thank you, everybody, for your thoughtful responses. Let's now start a conversation or dialogue among us. And I would like to propose the first question for everybody to think about and maybe bring together all the different angles. So one of the things that really came through your responses is the consent over time. And I think, Karen, you are absolutely right. This is not a question only about children and should not be only about children. I think this is a really a big question for all of us as researchers who are doing ethics beyond the duty. That IRP is the duty and or some sort of informed consent. But then when we go beyond that, and inquiry is a way of living and it continues for decades and so on. So let's chat first about the consent over time. What are you thinking?
I mean, now it's maybe now we talk also practicality of doing research or something. And that may be also to make the distinction between, for example, documentary film or when I do my research, because what I do, for example, is I have videos with which are kind of, I got the consent there and then, but I think them, if there might be a change, is that I don't sell them. I don't give them to a publishing house into an article or something, so that I try to keep power over those kind of videos. So, and that's kind of at least somewhere back in my mind, and I feel like, okay, if suddenly that person would approach me or there would something happen, then I still have, or you can say it's online, it's shared on video, but it's not here. It's a streaming place somewhere, so I can take it down like this, because in a way I haven't sold it onto a platform which is somewhere out of my hands. And even legally I might have done that, because obviously I say, well, this is connected to this article, blah blah blah. But I know if there might, so I like to have a little bit of power over the videos. That's a range sort of practicality in terms of, and that's got something to do with time, that there might be a chance that it actually can be taken away to a degree. So that's something about time, which I would say different. When you do a documentary film, you would actually sell everything to the world, and then it's out of your hands. So keeping your hands on the steering wheel somehow could be something.
What that reminds me of is also for who is it for? So that when you are saying that, is that I'm not doing it for selling, I'm doing it for research purposes, and therefore that is something else. And what it made me think of, and I know there are people in this room as well who are involved in Reggio Emilia practices, and then I thought, well, there the videoing is very much also for the children, right? So that when you can look, and we've also been involved in Research CERN, where it is then sharing that with the children and seeing as another way in which we can engage in research, and what is it that the children themselves make of that. So much of that just depends on who is it for, and the awareness of that consent is something that is, as we know, is that so little is communicated through words and so much is communicated through the body, and how that kind of attunement is it to what is the right thing to do, is part of that, right? So it's taking voice as something that is much more expansive and also includes other things than human voice, and much greater awareness, but an ongoing negotiation, I think, that is part of good research practices, right?
Can I add another dimension to this, which this whole notion of time and overtime, but to say that any bit of evidence is captured at a moment in time, and in a certain time and place and space, and that we have to be really cognizant of that the meanings that are foregrounded or on top or subtle or whatever at that time might be very differently interpreted or seen later or at another time, and we have to be very well aware of that. And I was just, it was the two boys with their hoodies back to front, and I don't know about you, but in my time, and I live in and work in inner city in Birmingham, hoodies or faces hooded is seen as quite an unnerving, quite a dangerous thing. And now previously it never was, but for me, when I watched that little bit of video, I found it a little bit, I could feel myself feeling a little bit, oh, what is this about with why won't they show their faces, and what are they trying to do? And it was like they became even more kind of, because they were hidden behind the hoods. But maybe that interpretation is because of the time and space that I operate in now, and if I came back to it later, I might not, or if I'd have looked at it 10 years ago, I wouldn't have had that interpretation. So when we talk about time and revisiting things later or with a different lens. I think it's kind of being really aware that everything has a contemporary relevance of that time, which is continuously, it's in dynamic, it's shifting. And therefore, again, if we revisit things, we have to be careful about that temporality, that time and space and place. What does that mean? And it links back to the other stuff about the impact of the nun. Those humans, those hoodies, for me, were quite powerful actors in that piece of footage. And I was all straight away asking questions. Who said? I know they wanted to hide their faces, or we have this blurring of faces, which I'm always really uncomfortable about as well. But who said that was how they were going to hide the face, and why did they choose to do it? Who chose that? Why did they choose? What effect did that have on what's? It raises all kinds of issues for me, but I'm conscious that that's because I reacted like that to those hoodies being used in that kind of way. So time in a kind of temporal moment, and is something to think quite carefully about, not just in terms of a child's journey and it shouldn't just be the child, this ongoing ascent. You're right, it applies to all of us. We have to think carefully when we revisit things and re-look at them and reuse them for different purposes, however attractive that might feel.
It's interesting, in US, the informed consent has a statement that your research or the findings of this research, including your data, can be used for future, and it just has future in there, presentations, publications, research material. So basically, the participants are consenting for any future research that time space kind of yields. And that's interesting way to think about that too, that you are consenting at the moment in that time space, and then researchers need to make the decision how the data will be used afterwards.
But how possibly could you give consent for an unending future? Look at how we have no idea how technology might take on those voices and reversion them and do that. How can you kind of give your informed consent to that? You can't, I don't think.
Yeah. And I think that for me, much of this comes to the situational ethics of the researchers and the processes that we engage in as scholars. And I'm not sure that we can have a blanket response to all this. A little bit what Sharon, what you were mentioning, that there are so many situational elements that we need to kind of encounter and face and be responsible for when we are doing inquiry in ongoing ways.
Can I just quickly respond, because but I think also what comes out that it's and that's also then to Chris, when you say you reacted, because you react so directly to an image or to a video, is a very, very powerful thing. So it's in a way, it's this kind of magic power you get when you use videos, and you can use it to, give someone voice who normally maybe doesn't really have a voice or is not really visible, and in a very powerful way, and people react to it very directly. And with that power comes, in a way, it's almost like sort of sounds too strange when I say it, but with that power comes that responsibility of what you're going to do with it, which can't be answered in any sort of form or something, because you're gonna either reproduce cliche, which a lot of images do, visuals do, or you can break cliche, or you can, so there's all this, it comes with a lot of responsibility to the person who is on there, but also to the whole group which is represented, so all those kind of things. And because it's so powerful, these kind of things demand a lot of reflection, I think, because it's very, it works directly, people react to it directly on different levels, and that has to be sort of thought about before you put out the image. or the video.
I think that's really true. And I think we can't kind of cater for all things, but there are some general ethical principles like non-malevolence and social benefit, and you're making those kind of nuanced judgments all the time. Is why are you doing it, and can you defend doing it, and could you explain it why you're doing it, and could you could you stand by the actions in an ethical way? So there's some kind of broader underpinning principles that help you make those really quite. Ethics is a really tricky road to navigate, and there's often no correct or incorrect or right or wrong. It's quite nuanced and context dependent, but in the end we as researchers have to answer for what we do, and we have to show we were operating with best intent and with social benefits involved. And these are the kind of underpinning things that you're right, Sean, that responsibility we have to think hard about these issues, and to not kind of be simplistic about it is really important. It's one of the most fascinating things I find about documenting and gathering, is that thinking through, are people being kept safe, that no harm should come? Are they being kept safe? Have they had an opportunity to reflect back on? And these are kind of basic principles of ethical practice, aren't they? Which, but I think because the technology and the way to interpret and use images and voice, and Karen, you're right, voice comes in many ways. We communicate in many ways, and manipulate that. We have, we just have to be deeply thoughtful about it, I think, and careful and caring for our subjects, if we want to use that term, for those with whom, and I also mean that about the places. We have a responsibility to the planet and to the things on the planet that aren't just human as well. We have a responsibility to what we do in terms of when we use objects or non-human things there as well. They deserve careful thought as well, because our research can have consequences for them.
It just shows how, the whole thing about, just zooming into a tiny detail doesn't seem to be doing justice to the fact that in education and in research, or education research, that we always sort of negotiating between those with these dilemmas that are guided by, or pulling us in different direction in terms of protection and on the one side, and autonomy on the other, right? So and where you are on that continuum has a lot to do with, I don't know, worldviews, or ideas about childhood, and but I think if not, there is a baseline of trust, right? So if no matter how much you could put in rules or regulations or in laws, I mean, at the end of the day, you, for example, step in, through someone's house, or you use personal information. But what really gets me, in terms of the way the GDPR seems to be used in certain cases in certain universities, is that it makes research really difficult. And so that it's interesting what you were saying about the hoodies, but if they hadn't done that, then it couldn't have been used. So what you see in some of the video, in photographs, that then you get these horrible blocking out of faces, which is a real form of violence, I think. But so what is it that what is it, how does it work? What does it bring about? And now with the issue of voice, and we actually, I'm busy with an article at the moment, and now I've just actually have to turn to some experts to ask me to slightly modify the voice, because that's also personal information, although the mother even didn't recognize the voice. So that was very interesting. So how do you make those decisions? What kind of questions do you need to ask, especially when the people themselves involved really like it? And I can remember one of my friends that she was working at a school, And the children really wanted their own names in her work, you know, because they were proud of being in her work and in her PhD. And they didn't want to have the pseudonyms. And then in the end, you know, they sort of compromised that they could choose their own pseudonyms. But, you know, there's so many questions. And I like what you're saying, Chris, is there are more questions really here. It is staying with those questions that that show, I think, that we always constantly continue with those with asking those questions in order to guide us in our practices. But there has to be a baseline of trust, or we couldn't do any research, right?
Yeah. And I think the baseline of there is some underpinning principles like no harm should come, or that, you know, that should always be there. And then over the top of that, there's more nuanced decisions. I mean, research for me is just a series of choices all the way along the line that, you know, at every single stage you're making choices, and some of those choices are practical and straightforward and technical, but some of them are ethical actually, and usually for me there's many more ethical than practical, and but they're the fascinating questions about how respectful we are to our world, and how we generate knowledge that's useful and usable. Because Sean's right, you know, I think video footage or film is such a powerful medium for conveying evidence and information, so we would want to use it, but I think certain methods or techniques bring with it additional questions to think about. But we also, the ethics shouldn't paralyze us either, because in the end we have to, and you could say, oh, there's so many issues with a young child with particular needs that it's best not to go there. So we tend to, where it's difficult, we tend to skirt around it and ignore it, when actually, isn't it those places where those kind of complex problems, complex issues, the knotty ones are where we've got to situate our work more, which offers more challenges to us. But actually, isn't that the satisfying stuff to do, to find a way to do that? But I do think it's getting more challenging as we move into a different age, with different expectations and different possibilities for us. But the new possibilities of storage and reversioning and using brings additional kind of questions to us, which is what this conversation is about, I think.
Just the last
thank you, everybody.
Can I just make a last point?
Yes, Karen, what?
Okay, very quickly about researching with your own children, is that
I was thinking, Karen, let's do that in the small groups, because we are, yes. I just want to say one thing about the harm. So if I think about what is important in my scholarship, it is not doing harm. So about everything about ethics and the complexity of situational ethics and all forms of different ethics, the harm is something that I'm really sensitive to, and harm is something that we can only anticipate that, and it is never a completed task. It's not that check, I'm done with the harm, but it's something that comes with us, stays with us, as long as the data and the participants are part of our lives. But what we really need to be attuned to, and what IRB, at least in my context or in US context, is definitely not attuned to, is AI. And the way that scholars are taking data into these online spaces, whether it's through AI directly analysis programs, or it is done through transcription programs. So these are spaces now where we need to be, as scholars, proactive and think about the ways that AI and data security is changing daily. IRBs are lacking because they are institutional spaces, so they are not addressing this currently. But the data is being used, leaked, being shared in our AI universe continuously, which is kind of very scary. So George, what if we make the small groups now and we talk about the researching with your own child in the small groups? Should we do one group for each of the panelists? Do we have enough people,
So
George?
that's
So what do you,
three.
Aaron? Yeah.
If we do three groups, then we have 4 to
Yeah.
5 participants. Or do you want to do it 4 groups and then you can be with one? Then it's 3 to 4.
It doesn't matter. Either way, it's fine.
Maybe we do 4 breakout rooms. Okay, great. I'm gonna
And
open
then
now.
why don't we do time-wise? Should we do the 15 minutes breakout rooms or shorten it to 10?
I think in the interest of being able to speak at the end about next steps, perhaps we should keep it to 10 minutes.
Okay, so let's
Which
do
also,
yeah. Or maybe we
Mhm.
go, yes, well, we have 11 minutes if we start now, so till 9.
right. So I've opened the rooms and then
Oh, bye, Nina.
the panelists are not assigned, so you can choose a room to go into. I don't know, does everyone know how to do that? So Søren, Christine, Mirka, Karen, you can each choose a room to go into.
Okay.
Maybe room 3 has only got 2 people, so maybe that would be good. Someone can go into room
Okay,
3.
I'll go to 3. Yep.
Great. And maybe someone can go into room 1.
So I go to
Chris,
room 1. Oh, Chris
sure.
Chris can go any.
Chris, you can go anywhere you'd like, or you can go maybe to either room 1 or room 2.
I don't
Do you
mind.
know how to go into the room?
It just says I can't see my name on the screen.
Mm. It looks
Okay, so
different for
I'm
me
gonna
because
go
I'm
to 2. I'm gonna go
sorry,
to 2.
Mirka, before you go, can you just tell us what does it look like for you? How did you join the room? Just to explain to Chris,
Just
because it looks different from
click the blue button.
to say join.
Yes, to join. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so Mirka's going to room 2 and Chris, maybe you can go to room 1. Great.
Synnøve, while nobody else is there, why don't you share with us where you are? Because
Yeah.
Well, I'm in Norway, and well, I did the mini troll video, you know. So and I did go and ask for new consent, actually. So the 13, 14-year-olds have seen it, and they consented, and the parents consented, and the parents were very excited about it because one of the moms actually said that I would never have known it was my son.
You're right.
So yeah.
Right.
But anyway, we asked for consent, a new consent. Yeah.
you can relax. Yeah.
Yeah. But you know, the discussion about AI and everything, I can't guarantee that nothing is going to happen with the video. Of course, it could happen, lots of things. It could.
But then we just have to be honest about that when we talk about it.
But I think this, because so just to the AI thing, because I think it's also that we also have to be aware of, so of what we put out there of images is also making an imprint on the AI. So on
That's
the
exactly
so-
that
so-
it is. Yes.
So because we had this now with an image of a boy South Africa playing like a PlayStation, and I was like, Anwar, should we put it out? Should we put it now? I was like, yeah, okay, well, let's do it because it's him. And then suddenly I realized there was also something. If I put now in an AI and say, give me an image of a boy playing PlayStation, then it's a white boy, kind of Northern European looking, playing a PlayStation. But with the image I put out, actually with about someone doing this, so you also push into the algorithm with, you know, you can sort of change, make small imprints with the stuff we put out there as well, which can work against certain cliches or stereotypes, which can be picked up. So in a way, you can, in a good way, also push things into the algorithm.
George, should we go to the whiteboards now?
Someone is getting excited.
I don't know. Should I explain?
Yes,
Yeah.
please.
Okay,
give
great.
us,
So
yeah.
basically, we've started doing this thing quite often in our sessions of different kinds where we use the whiteboard almost in a sort of a P4C philosophical inquiry type way, where if in your breakout room you had a question that came up, or it doesn't even have to be phrased as a question, but just something that was really interesting to you, please articulate it on the board. Either you can draw with a pen or you can write it on one of these. If you want to text here and you're not sure how, you can just double click on one of the, like if you go onto this yellow one and then you double click, then you can write something. And then it's also quite nice. You can kind of click on the little blue dot next to it and it will extend it to an arrow. So I encourage everyone to just play a little bit. You can also add shapes and draw. There's a pen. If you're not sure, you can either send a little message in the chat or you can just ask.
Could you
if you're not sure how to
send the
use it.
link? George, could you put the link in the chat?
This is just in Zoom, so everyone should just be able
Oh.
to.
We can just go
edit
on.
it.
Yeah, we can just go on
You
with
can
the.
just on
Yeah.
your screen. It's a Zoom whiteboard, so you should just be able to do it.
Okay, perfect.
You
Yeah.
shouldn't need to click anything. Yeah.
I have done it not long ago, but I don't know. I can't seem to line to write. What am I doing there? George, how can you just
Hello.
write How can you just type again in the post-its? I can't, I'm a bit lost.
You just double click on the post-it and it will allow you to type.
Oh, double click.
You just double click. Yeah, it should work.
No,
If
I see.
anyone's having.
Can I just add a reply, even when it's an empty post-it? I can do that.
I'm just making some people's text a little bit bigger, if that's okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, you don't have to follow
I was
me.
trying to do that. Thanks. Wow.
Sure. Oh,
So sorry, messed that up.
I'm gonna post yours for you, yeah?
Thank you. I don't know why I'm such an
Oh,
idiot.
your face. Look at your faces here. That's nice. But have you given consent for your face to be there? Ruka, do you wanna should we like read out some of the things?
And what did you say, Church?
Should we read out some of the things or invite people to read out?
Let's give a few more minutes for people to, and then we can use this as a discussion kind of another provocation, and people can share and talk about it. How's that?
Great. Also, just if anyone doesn't know, you can at the bottom you can zoom in and out and move around. So if you're too zoomed in right now, you might not realize that there's stuff written on the whiteboard that you can't see. I hope that makes sense.
Mm.
Okay, let's start wrapping it up. All right, thanks everybody. So George, can you keep the whiteboard there, and then we can continue conversation. Now we have these additional thoughts. Who would like to share and continue the conversation?
I love that comment, the question here. I wonder what worlds are rendered possible, impossible of responding in presencing or absenting children. And how do we go about thinking through such in our academic writings? What worlds are rendered possible and impossible? I really like that because it makes what kind of worlds are we creating, right? In the way.
Yeah, I wrote that. I've been thinking about that in terms of like I felt the lack of space for writing about such dilemmas or meetings or encounters with these dilemmas in the research projects. And then I sometimes just wondered if there were more space to think through and think out loud about all of these very specific situations that we find in each of our research processes, because something is rendered possible over others when thinking about consent with children. Yeah.
I like what you are suggesting, Lasse, because for me it takes this question of research participation into ontological spaces and spaces where we as a researchers are responsible for not only consenting but creating a particular rendering of the world or creating a world, and that is a very different responsibility than consenting. So I kind of like the where you're going with that. Yeah.
And also following on from that is the, it's about relations, and what are the relations we're already a part of. So going back, to researching with your children, it's what is it that we need to silence or ignore that that as mothers, for example, or fathers or grandparents, that we have strong relations with our children, and that therefore, which actually links to some of the questions here about the unexpected, what happens when children expand the limits of kinds of data, etc. When you're in relation, of course, as a mother and on a daily basis, that what emerges is it's so part of what it already is in your PhD or in your other research projects, right? Those kind of conversations, those kind of relations. So another way of looking at it is not that it's an add-on, but it's actually trying to articulate what's already there. It might be absent, but it's always present too, right? So this notion of the absent presence, and so doing justice to the reality actually of what it means to do research, which is that we come home and there might be dirty nappies that need to be changed, and that and also what it makes possible. Only yesterday I was reading about this Norwegian football player, I won't mention names or so, who, thinks that his football has so improved since he has a baby boy. And not because it's a boy, but because he has a baby, and he relaxes more when he goes home. So it's these things are there and then are actually verbalized, written into something to do justice to the complexity of the world we are part of. And its richness, in terms of relations. I love the imaginary friend, Chris.
And that links to that thing about sometimes in the research process with children, because they have such amazing minds, they take you to places that you can't have imagined. And then you really got to think on your feet a bit about how you're going to handle that and make sure that you're modeling ethical practices as the thing evolves. But well, you know, a lot of research takes you down avenues that when you began and you got in consent where you hadn't, and it would be stultifying of the process if you said, oh no, I've got my plan, I've only got informed consent for that, so I'm not going to do that. You want the research to be dynamic in that way. But, you know, it's having those thoughtful processes going on about, well, what's the consequences of this in terms of the ethical engagement I've got with that individual or that place and space at this particular point in time. And that's why I say all along, informed consent and ongoing assent is not a one-off thing that you do at the beginning and then assume it's okay forevermore. It's constantly being adjusted and checked in with and renegotiated. And I think if you adopt that mindset for it, then it makes it makes it more authentic, but it also makes it more interesting for you, because you know all processes evolve and should bring you things you hadn't anticipated or surprises, or if it didn't, why are you doing it in the first place? You should have those opportunities, affordances for the unexpected, serendipity, surprises to happen. And they sometimes come in unexpected forms and from unexpected people as well. But it most often to me happens is when I'm working with children.
Because they're so much more interesting.
And they're not boundaried in the way that we are. They haven't yet learned the strict rules of the engagement. Yeah.
And I would like to also think about, okay, if we are moving to the post-human spaces, consent is a human-centered activity. So how we radically need to, and if we are already in existing relations with the world, what happens to permissions? And what happens to kind of it's a very different form of ethics that consent is responding to.
Yeah.
And I don't have any answers. I'm just kind of like how we need to adapt those inquiry processes when we are operating in the different space.
Yeah,
I was also interested in Lasse's question about how do you find and make more room for these kind of discussions and these kind of places in our world, and I think that's a really important point to make. And one of the things we've done at EC-ERA is to make sure any academic published papers has a serious space in that paper devoted to ethical issues, foregrounding it, because we think it's really important to do that and to show that. And I'm constantly pushing back against my university ethical boards about, you know, the complexity of it and why we need more time and why we need to talk more about some of these issues. So I think you know, there's a kind of activist role we can all have in how we write about things and what we foreground when we're doing it. And even, you know, and I would be, you know, if I was trying to publish in a place that wasn't interested in ethics, I'd be questioning that. What is this the place I want to put my stuff? I want to publish in forums that enable us to raise these key issues about how we conduct ourselves and how evidence is generated, knowledge is generated, and that it's generated in that ethical, sustainable way that I know everybody here today believes in because you're here, but I think we've got work to do in this field, in our own institutions, but also in the way we talk about our research at conferences and in seminars, and the way we publish our work as well. And I'd encourage you all to make sure that the ethical decisions you make are recorded in a way that you can reflect on them, but reflect the ethical processes that was underway.
That is a good transition. Thank you, Chris, to our next steps. So what would we like to do with these conversations? Thoughts that were raised today, these two specific vignettes. What are your thoughts?
Well, one of the things that we could be doing if people were interested is involving some collective writing. I mean, I think one of the that also has, yeah, it is quite urgent. I think what we find with a lot of PhD researchers in particular, that they're really fighting their ethics committees, you know, at universities, and sometimes it feels a little bit like maybe a paradigm war, or
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, you agree with that, Mirka?
Yes.
And so it's almost, although we know in qualitative research that it has always been a kind of a virtue, or really important for good research to acknowledge one's own positionality. But it seems that the kicking against post-qualitative research, yeah, a lot of researchers get a hard time. So, and that's what the collective is also sort of really is about, you know, supporting each other. And one of the ways in which we can do that is involve, getting involved in some collaborative writing. And we could do that, for example, by taking one or both vignettes. And we've got a recording of this. And then if people are really committed to just do some collaborative writing, we can just start and just see what is really nice. And also within the panel, they're very sort of also different different points of view, and then just see where we go with that, and find a place to publish it. And we've got already sort of 2 initiatives from the collective, one on non-representational and the other one on teaching post-qual. And it would actually be really nice to have one on research ethics as I mean, how we frame it and how we name it and all of that. But that we maybe, yeah, I mean, that would be one suggestion.
And what would you need? You meaning like everybody on the, what would help you to work through these challenges in your local context?
Really nice question.
Could I speak? Yeah, I'm the person who wrote about the imaginary friend, and I am currently working on how to like frame that for my dissertation proposal. So I would like any kind of thought partners or around that would be like incredibly helpful, because it's like hard. So yeah, I'll just put that out there.
So Maria, would that be some sort of mentoring support group, or would the paper writing also help there if you bring your examples, for example, into the paper as another vignette? What are you thinking?
Yeah, I think any of that, like I'd be happy, like writing would be really helpful, or like, yeah, any of that. Yeah, because I just don't have that space at my university. So I find this very generative.
I've started a folder and also a sheet, what is it? A Google Sheet thing, where I've put up some readings, that are sort of might be helpful and people can add. And also what it does is sort of link to and actually papers themselves, but also links to it. And we could even, as part of the writing, do some, some reading together of some of these papers. And I've put on the right-hand side sort of what excites me about it and why I think it's important. And we could maybe try and source one about imaginary friends and then add it so that it is a kind of sort of subgroup of people interested in research ethics and supporting us in that way. So that would be really nice, actually. So I can share that, George, with you. George is the contact person that if you're interested in reading, they've just put up their email address and then get in touch with George, and then they can make a list of people interested, and then I can share also the folder that we've started and take it from there.
I think there'd be some value in the group of you. I mean, I'm not, you're a group, but I think there'd be some value of you finding a place to post or collect together ongoing live ethical challenges, because we're all in a world where new challenges are coming all the time, and we're trying to keep up with that really fast. But just to collect what's being thrown at us or at you as a group of researchers, and how the questions that raises for you, and then at some point kind of regular analysis of what kinds of things are coming out of that could be quite a nice. You could develop group responses to some of those questions, or you could kind of do mentoring on the basis, or group people together if they've got similar issues. But I think just the capturing of these live questions as they're going on, just posting something, it kind of gets it off your chest for a start off. But it also maybe if it's a place that people can visit, you can have people can leave comments or suggestions or reflections on that issue. But I think just trying to map where the ethical territory is going in our work, and where you're kind of thinking, hang on a bit, that this is a bit kind of nuanced, or I've got no clear way forward with this, would be a valuable contribution that others would be interested in as well. I think would be a good service, but it would help each other too. And that's a fairly simple thing. It's just a space where people can post questions or documents.
I
we
really
can
like
do like
that too.
almost like a blog vibe.
Yeah,
But we can even host that on our own website.
Yeah.
We could do that on our website. Yeah.
George, it would be great to have a blog where people could post challenges and dilemmas and then get responses from the community.
Maybe like a forum. I'll look into that. I think the most difficult part of it.
I think
is
the jargon, they call them wicked problems.
Yes.
Wicked ethical problems. So you could write a whole paper on wicked ethical problems coming on that you've generated and lived through.
George, what did you want to say? Did you say about?
Oh no, it's all right. No, it's just a technical issue, but it's just something that has to be researched a bit of, moderating that and keeping it to be a safe space technologically and socially, but also have it be a place where anyone can post. It's just difficult. The cyber world is really difficult.
And I wouldn't say it could be posting from our community, so that we don't open it up outside so that it's a community-based resource.
Yes, yeah, exactly. So I just have to do a bit of research about the best way to do that, but it's a wonderful idea. Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
Yay.
Amazing. Well,
Karen and George, do you want to take up on the closing?
Thank you so much, Mirka.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody, for participating.
Yeah, this was really wonderful.
Thank you, Chris.
Lots to think about.
Ethan. Thank you all for coming, and thank you, Cinema, in particular, for for your vignettes and all of you also sharing these these sometimes really, really difficult difficult moments in our lives, and good luck with them as well. And so take care, and yeah, I really look forward to following up on this.
Mm.
Mm.
Yay.
That's
Thank you so
great.
much. Wow,
Thank
we
you.
were so on time. I'm so impressed.
Everyone.
You're very good. Thank you, George, for making this possible.
Well, thank you, Mirka.
Yeah, thanks, George.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Okay,
Cheers.
you,
take
bye.
care. Bye.
Bye. All right. Oh, let me.